Hi, welcome to Truth Be Told. I'm Tony Sweet with Captain Ron. Another guest from Contact, only a week away. We have Honovi Strongdeer in the house. We are going to talk to her about her workshop coming up at Contact in the Desert. And also, Honovi is a new thought leader, ambassador for Extraterrestrial Contact, medicine woman, and soul alignment guide. She presently lives in Peru, which I can't wait to get there one day, where she co-facilitates ceremonies by bringing through information that can help us live more aligned from the star nation of Sirius. At Contact, she's going to be talking about how to be a bridge between worlds, the drawing of a new era of ET contact, unifying the Earth with the stars. We want to welcome her to Truth Be Told for the first time, so please put your hands together. Honovi Strongdeer. Hello.
Hello there.
How are you today?
I'm so happy to be back in California. It's like my second home here now.
I know it's hard. It's hard when you go to other countries or other even states, and the weather here is pretty consistent, even though lately it's been pretty up and down with rain and chilly, but chilly for us is probably bikini weather some places else. So, well, we're excited to have you here. We have a lot to talk about. Like we said, coming up, Contact is just a week away. I can't believe it's just 1 week away. But so tell us, with your talk coming up on building bridges between worlds, and what does that mean? Is it more spiritually, how to connect, through meditation, or are we talking one day physically meeting extraterrestrials face to face?
Well, I think it's a combination of different things, because I feel that many of us feel like ambassadors or bridges between this new paradigm that is emerging and this old paradigm. And so for me, a bridge between worlds, it just means someone who is able to connect the dots between different areas, right?
Right.
And so many of us are bringing together science and spirituality, for instance, and logic and intuition, and many of these different areas, because in the past they have been seen as something quite separate. But I feel the consciousness is integration, bringing them together. And so being a bridge, it can look like many things. It can literally be those of us who are having some kind of contact with these extraterrestrial intelligences, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. It can be a very broad term too. It can be applied in different ways. That's how I see it.
One guest that we were talking to not too long ago, we were talking about with extraterrestrial alien beings, where we've always thought of them as flying saucers coming into our dimension, visiting our planet, even bringing us here and creating the human race. But is it possible for the alien beings, to actually not travel here physically, but mentally or, spiritually?
Yes, and I feel this is the new shift that is coming into this arena of ufology, because, most contact is occurring telepathically.
Right.
And this is something I mentioned in my upcoming talk at Contact. And the Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation actually published a groundbreaking study on the consciousness of contact. And I think they were interviewing near to about 6,000 people from over 125 countries all around the world, around the contact experiences people were having. And overwhelmingly, the information that they received is that it's not a physical, material phenomenon that has been very heavily focused on in recent years.
Right.
That's not to negate the physicality, the physical aspect, but we're looking at a very, some might call it a psychic or paranormal phenomena. And I feel that most people might not be, when they think of ET contact, they might just think of these bug-eyed aliens, right? That's what people think when I tell them I'm having these experiences. but we need to really open our minds and our hearts to the different possibilities.
Yeah, and I agree with you, because I think if you really think about it, because there's a lot of people that believe in extraterrestrials, but there's still a lot of people like, well, I don't see the evidence. There's no spaceships. I don't see any dead aliens until you prove it to me. But I think if you really think about it, I mean, this goes back thousands of years, even in the Bible, where they talk about angels and presenting themselves through a vision, and that's why I was wondering, aliens and angels are potentially could be the same. Do you agree with that?
Yes, most definitely. I feel like these terms, angel and extraterrestrial, they are crossover terms.
Mm-hmm.
These are just giving us context when we are having these conversations so that it can make sense to people. But when we look at different cultures, yes, they are referring to these beings, everything from angels to gods from the sky. And that was the context they had in those times to try to make sense of those
Right.
experiences. And it's interesting because the beings that I receive communication or downloads from, they I would describe them as angelic extraterrestrial beings. It's like, for me, it's like the same thing, because they're
Right.
so loving and they really want to help, and they're always saying how excited they are by these changes and shifts in consciousness. As we expand more and more, we start to perceive what has always been here, right?
Mm-hmm. Now, do you consider yourself an intuitive psychic, or are you starting to develop that gift more and more?
Yes, I guess you could call me an intuitive, an empath, or a psychic.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this gives us some context. It gives us a foundation to
Right.
understand what I do and how I receive these downloads, if you want to call it that, or communication. And I feel that everyone is an empath and everyone does
Yeah.
have this ability. But for some reason, in some people, just how some people have a proclivity to play the violin or the flute very well, some of us have this natural inclination, or we have this natural sensitivity, which allows us to open up into these subtler realms and be having these kinds of communication and contact.
Yeah, I agree. Because I mean, it kind of goes into the people that have natural gifts, like my brother, who he taught himself to play, the piano. Taught himself to. There was no. It was almost like this natural gift that it was just at birth, and then I'm his brother, and I
Right.
can't pick it up even with teaching. So I mean, it's just funny how some people have a natural gift. It's just instantly they know what to do, and it was almost like it was meant to be, or either that or from a past life. So, well, one thing that I think some of us in the ufology world, we're starting to hear more and more and more about abductions, and I don't know if you're really into the abduction part of it, but again, we had somebody on before, and they were talking about remote viewing, and I think going back to what we were talking about, not physically here, but the remote viewing for a lot of people in this realm is starting to grow, and so, do you feel a lot of the abductions again are not physical, but it's also mentally or remote viewing? And what do you think they're looking for? What do you think? Because it's been thousands of years. You would think the human race, they've seen us enough. Why do you think they still are looking at us with a abduction and doing surgeries and testings? And why do you think that is?
So to answer the question about remote viewing, yes, I think it's on the increase, and the way I see it is consciousness is non-local,
Right.
meaning it's not restricted to any time and space or physicality or our brain, as we have been led to believe by the mainstream
Right.
cultural conditioning and all of that. And so it seems like more and more people are having these experiences, whether they are leaving their body, astral projection and out of body experiences are really increasing a lot in the awareness of people. And so is remote viewing too. So I feel that's a real experience. And that is the shift that I see. It's becoming very experiential, right? For many years, we might have been reading about things, and now more and more people are having their own direct experience, whether that's just seeing something unusual, some lights in the sky, or being in meditation and receiving some kind of downloads, or working with psychedelics, because I'm a medicine woman. And I work with Mother Ayahuasca, which is a brew that is found in the Amazon jungle. And there's like a renaissance, in consciousness within all these different fields. And they all are each connected, right? But again, we are looking at them as something separate. And the extraterrestrials are encouraging us to bring these different components together. And in terms of what their motivation is, I think the way to look at it is, when we're talking about extraterrestrials, there's so many of them. My understanding is that there's literally so many, and some of them are belonging to different states of consciousness. So, of course, we are here in this 3D consciousness. So one extraterrestrial being could be coming from the 8th dimension, and another could be coming from the 5th, and they're going to have different perspectives and agendas, right? So when we're talking about extraterrestrials, I think we have to be very careful not to just band them all together with one agenda, because that's just like saying all of humanity is like a terrorist or something, because some of the extraterrestrials do humanity as terrorists, because there's a lot of volatility within the consciousness of humanity, and there's a lot of destruction, and people like to fight with each other and all that. But in terms of their motivation, I think it could be literally anything from them having some kind of vested interest in the person that they're abducting. Maybe there's certain genetics that certain people carry, and that's why they're carrying out these operations. And from my own understanding and information, there is also a hybridization program, and so that could also be a part of why they're experimenting on people. And literally, maybe it's a case of, because I've heard of people actually receiving healings too.
Yeah, I've heard of that too.
Yeah, so I think there's many different layers and components to it.
And somebody made a good point about saying pray that they're angels for good, not for, he said Lucifer, but I'm going to say just evil. So most of these, we've heard about, multiple different species of aliens. Some are protecting us. They say some are not, are for the better good of us. What do you say to that? Meaning, have you ran into negative energies from another dimension, and how, if you have, how do you handle that, and how do you put the wall up and say, yeah, not for me?
Yeah, so I have ran into all different kinds of beings, but I wanted to go back to that Edgar Mitchell survey for a moment, because they actually found out that 66% of people having these contact experiences said it was positive.
How many?
Which is 66%.
That's a lot, but still there's a lot that didn't have a great experience.
Well, in the survey, and bearing in mind they conducted this survey of 6,000 people, so 66% said it was positive, 29% said it was neutral, and only 5%,
said it was negative.
Said it was actually negative. So I find it interesting, because I feel that as a phenomena, we tend to focus on the negative aspect a lot, and I have encountered some beings that we would consider lower vibrational, and one of them tried to attack me psychically.
Really?
So and so I was kind of taken aback, and I asked my guides, these beings who are always with me, I said, who are these who is this shadow being that's trying to attack me? And the response was very interesting. They said, they are you. They said the shadow is you. They said there's different ways to look at it, but they are a component of yourself. And if you see them as a component of yourself, you take away their power.
Right.
Because they can only have power over you if you are giving your power to them, if you are getting in this fearful state, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And so they were talking
Yeah.
to me about, they said to me, if you encounter this kind of energy, instead of going into fear and becoming defensive, which is the go-to response from
Right.
all of us, even with regular beings in normal life, that's what we do. They said, instead of doing that, they said, try to soften and try to open your field of energy. Because they said, when you go into fear, you're basically collapsing your, what they called auric field of energy. And it's like a healer shot for these beings, you know?
Mm-hmm.
They thrive on you becoming fearful and contracting. And they even said to me that within this field of spirituality, there's a lot of misunderstanding. So a lot of people wanting to protect themselves. And they said, you know what happens when you protect yourself? You're contracting your field of energy. And again, you're making it easier for that being or that thought form or whatever it is to come in to your like periphery. But
Right.
if you are really expanding, if you're really in your heart and you know who you are, you know that you are beyond this physical form, and that you are the creator, and that everyone is your brother and sister, even those beings that we consider negative.
Right.
If you come from that angle, what are they going to do? They can't, they can't do anything to you unless you are going into that contraction. That's what was shared with me.
And I think I was going to ask you if it's a control thing, because when some people that have a control issue, I mean, they want to control everything in their lives and they're trying to let go. It is scary. And so becomes a negative thing. It's like me. I'm going to give an example. I am like terrified of snakes, hate them. But then you have my brother who can walk up and go, oh, a snake, and just pick it up and go, look at that snake. It's so,
Yeah.
For me, it's a bad experience seeing a snake, but for him, it's like nothing, or it's like, oh, this is nature, great. And okay. So I think it's a control thing where if I'm going to say the ayahuasca, I'm sure people that have control issues, I'm sure probably have a harder time letting go and panicking.
Yes, definitely. And it's knowing that each frequency in this multidimensional model of reality is consisting of different feelings, a different way of being.
Right.
And so this 3D consciousness that we are in, there's a belief that if I can't see it, then it doesn't exist.
Right.
Like that's the thought, right? And there's also a belief of a fear of losing control. There's like this idea of this density being about fear and survival, right?
Right.
And there's also there's many components that are reflective of this consciousness level that we have been in for many, thousands of years, and now it's shifting. And yeah, I think that we have to be willing to give up control. And it's not always easy. It's not like there's a manual book for
Right.
these times.
I wish there was. Of course, I probably wouldn't read it anyway. I was kidding. I said if there was a manual, I probably wouldn't have read it anyway. So
right, exactly. I think we're all looking for
I'm a man.
manual.
I'm a man. It's like us looking at maps. We just don't do it.
But
so.
I do think that there are certain tools that can help people to get out of their intellect and their ego and to relinquish some of that control and start to really open up and trust that there's something bigger that is guiding them.
Mm-hmm.
That is.
Well, we were talking to Elizabeth Wilcock Wednesday about ayahuasca, and do you feel that because we're talking about how a lot of people have been healed spiritually, physically, but trust, because somebody said in the chat room, trust is unifying, which is great, but if it's as you know, as the world is getting now 2019, trusting is such a hard thing now with, politics, with governments, with religion, with so many things that are putting up walls and dividing us. How do we experience that true self and true love for everyone when there's so many devices? This thing called iPhone, it feels like it's bringing us together, but we read instantly negative things. So how do we, through ayahuasca, how do we become one more again and start becoming more loving and of ourselves and our planet and just other people?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's many different layers to becoming more loving, and it has to begin with ourself and embracing other as self. This is the message that the beings that I commune with are always telling me. And we have a tendency to see other people, and not just people, the animal brother and sister and the rock kingdoms, the plant kingdoms, as something separate to ourselves. And we really need to start moving in the world in a way that things are related and connected with one another, right? And starting small, because sometimes it can be very overwhelming, like you said, with all these different divisive topics and agendas, and just starting on the ground level with you, with your community, with your family,
right?
It's so easy to be loving to a stranger, but how are you going to be loving and spiritual when your sister is being a pain in the ass?
Right.
Or right. And so it's kind of like, for me, everything is a spiritual endeavor. Even within spirituality, we've created these kind of fixed ideas. This is spiritual, this is not spiritual. Right. And for me, everything is a spiritual endeavor. If we can approach it like that, we can allow more love in. And also, what's helped me is giving people the freedom to be themselves.
True.
So when I'm sharing on these topics, I don't come from an angle of trying to convince people or even trying to persuade them. That's not what I'm about. Because guess what happens when you're trying to convince and persuade? You're going to get that pushback, right? You're going to get that defensiveness, right? Because it's funny, because I was talking to a guy in the taxi the other day, because of course I always end up talking about aliens.
Right. Well, it's an interesting topic. They're like, aliens, what?
Right. And it's really becoming a hot topic in people's awareness. And he, of course, when people ask me what I do, I tell them I speak at conferences, I help people get on purpose, I work with medicine. And he was like, extraterrestrials? He's like, that's ridiculous. Yeah. And I said, and I just, I gave him the free will and the permission to have that opinion. It didn't make me feel angry or upset. In the past, it would have. I would have felt,
I'm right.
Yeah, exactly. In the past, I would have felt like, oh no, I need to tell him how asleep he is, right? Which is sometimes a way of thinking we can get trapped into. But I just gave him that space, and I just shared from my perspective. And I was just saying to him, well, the government has already disclosed that it did have a unit within the government where it was researching UFOs, and they've actually released footage about this. Like, are you not aware of it? And I was
he's like, no, I'm aware.
What was that?
I was like, he's like, oh, I've seen it. And you're like, well, why are you questioning?
I don't think he's seen it at all. So I think the thing that can help us to trust and open our hearts is meeting people where they are and allowing them to be where they are, and allowing them to be different and have a completely different perspective to yours. Like, that is the new paradigm. Can we be inclusive of each other's opinions and perspectives?
And that's that. And we'll ask you this, and then we'll need to take a quick break because we got to hear from our good friend George Norrie. But that's what I was saying is, like, how do we build bridges, or build a bridge between worlds when we can't even do it with ourselves here on planet. So could you answer that? Or is it maybe that's the beginning for us to build bridges between everybody else on planet?
Yeah, I think the bridge building has to start with us. Like I said, how can we treat ourselves better? How can we extend that kindness with ourselves?
Right.
What are we putting in our bodies? Are we in integrity with what we're saying? Is there consistency? It has to begin with us. And then from there, we can extend that. Because how are we going to give to others what we don't have for ourselves?
True. That's true.
Right. How are we going to give compassion and understanding and build bridges when we can't even do that with ourselves? So it has to all come back to ourselves first. And then from there, we can start to build out. That's what I see as the new rise of awareness that is coming into this field of ufology and also spirituality and personal development too.
Love it. So we're going to be just take a minute break. We're going to come back and talk to. Now, am I pronouncing your name right? Because Honovi.
Yeah, it's Honovi. Some people think it's Hanovi. They spell it with an A.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm terrible with names, so that's why I just want to make sure. But we're going to come back and talk more with Honovi about her upcoming contact workshop and lecture, and we're going to talk to our good friend George Norrie. He's going to tell us all about it, so we'll be right back.
Join me, George Norrie, in Indian Wells, California for the 7th Annual Contact in the Desert UFO Conference, May 31st to June 3rd. Contact in the Desert is an epic weekend of adventure filled with exciting explorations into ancient aliens, human origins, crop circles, UFO sightings, disclosure, and the newest evidence of ongoing contact. This amazing weekend offers over 50 lectures, 40 workshops, 8 exciting panels, special events, and a luncheon that I'm hosting. Contact in the Desert also features leading experts including Giorgio Tsoukalos, David Wilcock, Linda Moulton Howe, Michael Tellinger, Eric von Daniken, Doc Wallach, and many more important researchers and scientists in the field. Contact in the Desert is your place for inside information. Join us at thecontactinthedesert.com to get your tickets today. It's time to make contact. That's contactinthedesert.com. Don't miss it. Contactinthedesert.com.
All right, we're back. This is Tony Sweet with Captain Ron. Captain Ron will be back next hour. He got stuck in traffic, LA traffic, you know that. But we have Honovi Strongdeer, I love that last name, and we are here talking about her upcoming appearance at Contact in the Desert. Get your tickets. Captain Ron and I will be there. In fact, we're going to be introducing some of the speakers on some of the stages. We're excited to do that. But Honovi, I want to ask you, you talk about soul blueprints, and this dumb Kansas blonde here. I want to know a little bit more about blueprints for, soul blueprints. What is that?
Yeah, so the way I see it is that each of us is so unique, and we incarnate here onto this planet with a unique soul blueprint, which is consisting of, you could call it like a template or an energetic matrix that is giving you a specific set of instructions about what you're here to do. And so each blueprint is containing within it what I call soul archetypes. So for instance, an archetype could be that you are having the messenger as part of your blueprint, the visionary, the leader, a public speaker, a writer, an artist, a performer. And so within each archetype, there is a series of instructions as to how to activate and embody that blueprint. And so I help people get clear on what that blueprint is and how they can really fully step into it and activate it and embody it.
And we had Richard Martini on, and we were talking about soul groups. He made it a kind of an example of like Earth is a theater, and everybody in the cast was part of my soul group. And so when that theater closes, meaning like we leave this plane, go back to to energy, and then the other side, and then we plan for the next big debut. Do you feel that a lot of the soul blueprints include soul groups?
I do, because I feel many of us incarnate as groups that activate and help each other remember our purposes for being here. I feel that within this 3D reality, there's a lot of focus on doing things yourself. And what I've been shown time and time again is that a lot of that is based in the what I call the lovable ego, because I don't feel that we need to be against the ego or wage war with it, because we
Right.
give it more weight when we do that. So I call it the lovable ego because it just wants our attention. And what I was shown is that collaboration is indicative of this 5D consciousness that we're expanding into, and really leaving this lovable ego at the doorstep to come together with others for a greater cause that is bigger than our own agenda. I
Wow.
feel many of us are here to do that.
Yeah, and I know about a year or two ago, I remember doing a past life regression, and I'm like, there's no way, my ADD is too strong. I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna. And sure enough, I envisioned, through this process, and she's great. I envisioned my past and where I was at, and even had a name. And I looked the name up after the session, and that person was in that era, and he was an artist. And I was just like, oh my gosh. But there's people in our lives that I feel are part of my soul group, meaning they come in at the right time, they say the right things to keep you going, then they exit. And you're like, who was that? Like the Lone Ranger is like, who was that masked man? Because it's like, I don't even know where they're at anymore, but they made such an impact in my life that it just felt like it had to be there for a reason. And I think you're absolutely right. I think soul groups are so important, and I hate when people try to deny it, because I think those type of people are the ones that get lost in their own world on this planet, on this go around, and they get lost and they don't accept our other cast members.
Exactly. And I also think that these soul groups, they really can help us to accelerate on our path. And I even say to people that they help us jump timelines if we're open to it. That just means they help us to really go forward and accelerate on our path, as opposed to if we had not met them,
Right.
They, like you said, it's very synchronous when they enter into our lives, and then they'll kind of make some kind of, it could be like a simple thing, a suggestion to read a certain book, or even attend something like Contact in the Desert.
Right.
And then you take that piece of advice, and then just opens up this whole other horizon. And another nice way of looking at it is thinking that everyone in a larger context is part of our soul group. And so every person I meet, I always feel as though the universe is speaking through them to me, and I need to hear exactly what I need to hear in that place and in that time.
Yeah, and it's funny, like you understand it when it's like a family member, but when it's somebody that's completely out of character that steps into your life just for a moment, that's when I'm like, there was something to that. So,
well, it's interesting that you said when you understand they're a family member, because the way I see it, everyone is my family, really.
True.
And that is the new paradigm too, because we are used to being very programmed to just think, this is my family, this is my blood.
Right.
And you over here in this
Yeah.
other country, in this other whatever, you're another religion maybe.
Right.
And so this is also part of the issue, because earlier we were talking about oneness, right? And so for us to really start to integrate and embody that, we're being encouraged to see each other as brother and sister and as family. And I feel like that's happening more and more. And I feel that in the future, certainly, and it's already happening now, it's going to become increasingly difficult to turn a blind eye to the injustices in the world. That's why we have like the Me Too movement,
Right.
and all these things are just surfacing. They've always been there.
Always
but
been there, yeah.
Right? We weren't aware of them. And now it's going to become very hard to turn a blind eye and to not feel the plight of others, because we're starting to feel, this connection point. between all nations and cultures and belief systems.
You know what's fascinating? There was I think a few years ago, I'm a big family tree history buff, and Ancestry.com, a lot of people are like, oh, DNA, whatever. But they do this DNA testing, and you can see kind of, your back. I'm a big mutt. I mean, I'm a mutt of all over the world. But what this, I don't know if it was Ancestry.com, but it was somebody else that brought, like 100 people together. And everybody took the DNA testing. There was, people from Ireland and England and America and Jewish and Middle Eastern, and they had them all in a room. And then about a month later, they brought them back after the testing, and they said, you and you, one was from Lebanon, and the other one was from Israel. Come up here, and you two come over here with Irish and English, and, because they had the battle. And they said, through DNA, you guys are cousins. And you could just see them like shocked, like, what? I mean, because everybody's like, oh, I'm American. Okay, well, I'm American that happens to come from England, Irish, Scandinavia, Czechoslovakia, blah, blah. And so we're a mix of everybody, and we actually are family. If you just keep going down the line, we are all family.
We are, and I also feel as this field of ufology is starting to go mainstream,
mm-hmm.
and what I believe, what I've been shown, is the return of the star nations or these extraterrestrial beings to our planet. This is also going to create a very kind of domino cascading effect where humanity comes together more and more. And I think we're already witnessing the beginning stages of that. But there's also a lot of, like you said, divisiveness happening too. There's everything happening all at once because as we are going through this upgrade in consciousness, it's stirring to the surface everything that's out of alignment with these ideas of unity consciousness.
I love that. And before, because I can't believe the time is going so fast, we only have like less than 10. But we have a couple questions in the chat room, and I always want to include our family here in the chat room. So, Kara, I think it's Kara. Sorry if I mispronounce it. She said, I am third eye blind, no visuals when I imagine. Does ayahuasca always cause visual hallucinations? LSD and mushrooms have not done it for me. It's more of a thought. So what is your take on that? Does ayahuasca cause visual hallucination?
It depends. It's a person by person case. So ayahuasca is a blend of two plants, the ayahuasca vine, which is known as kapi, and a shrub called chacruna, which is containing the DMT. This DMT effect is what is giving rise to these feelings, downloads, these different visions and insights, right? And it's said that we are already releasing this DMT when we're dreaming and also when we die. And the pineal gland, some people are referring to it as the third eye. And people are saying that the pineal gland is responsible for producing this DMT. But from my experience and talking with many other people, it's an individual by individual case. And maybe it's going to be a little bit more challenging for someone who was born blind, for instance, as opposed to someone who did have vision and they lost it later on. Right. Yeah. And I've heard of cases of blind people doing medicine and having some kind of vision, because the vision you are accessing is not physical vision. It's this inner vision, right? So it is possible. And, maybe you need to come to Peru and come to one of our ceremonies or retreats.
Oh my! I mean, I know I would love to. I'm a person. I've never drank. I never smoked. I never did any type of drugs. Chemically or naturally, I just never have. I think maybe it is a control issue for me. But for some reason, ayahuasca is the only thing I've ever said I would like to try, just more for the spiritual side of it, not just to, get high and hallucinate. But I'm more of a spiritual connection for myself. I've always wanted to try that. So one day maybe I'll come down there.
Yes. I think in recent years, ayahuasca has become very popular because it's helping people to connect in a very profound way with their purpose for being here. It's a very accelerating path. It's not something that is for everyone, though. I think some people
How
are
do you know that, though?
Well, we conduct interviews with people.
Got it.
You know, we try and kind of gauge where they're at and whether they would be a good fit, because people react to it differently. And then, yeah, I use my intuition and kind of sense, okay, this person is ready. But, you know, some people think it's a drug, but we don't consider it a drug. The indigenous people of the world do not consider ayahuasca as a drug. It's really a medicine. It has its own sentience, its own intelligence that you can actually commune with to make your journey easier, you know, because sometimes people's journeys are really intense.
And so, if somebody came to you and said, you know, I've been sober for a year, you know, would you consider, or if people that are kind of have a drug addiction, do you consider that something that you don't want to touch, or do you just go deeper and to see if this person can handle it?
I go deeper with them and ask them some questions and kind of gauge, because that's what a medicine man and woman does. We have certain gifts and abilities to be able to look beyond the surface level. You know, that's part of the role that I do as a healer. And, you know, sometimes people get very fixed in these ideas that, oh, this person is an addict or this person is that. But there's been many cases where people have had addictions and the medicine has helped them. And that's why the psychedelics are actually becoming decriminalized. So we just recently saw magic mushrooms become decriminalized in Denver, Colorado.
I saw that.
I believe is the first state. And I think it's going to be a domino effect. Many other places will follow.
I love it. Well, we have just about 2 minutes left, so I want to make sure everybody knows coming up in just 1 week, Honovi's going to be at Contact in the Desert. What day are you going to be there? What time? Do you know?
So I believe I'm talking on the 31st of May, and my talk is at 9:15 in the evening.
Oh, perfect. Well, I'll be there for sure. I got to come in late, but definitely going to be there, and I hope that everybody checks out your website. It's right down below. And you can now. Do you have trips to Peru for ayahuasca, or healers?
Yes.
Do you teach shamanism or?
Yes. So me and my good friend Paco, he is a Peruvian medicine man. We are working together now to serve medicine.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, we're doing a retreat in August, and people will be able to find me at Contact in the Desert to speak about it more. And we're also going to be looking at doing smaller, kind of what we call our dietas, where basically you go on this strict diet because strict diet where you're not eating meat or salts and spices, because they can kind of interfere with the process of the medicine cleaning, because that's what it's doing. It's cleaning, it's releasing, right? And so we're going to be doing them July onwards, and I'll be sharing more information on my website and at the talk at Contact about that.
Awesome. Well, we thank you so much for being the first time. I know it's not going to be the last. You'll have to come back and see us again. But until next time, thank you, and we can't wait to see you in a week.
Thank you so much, brother. Real pleasure to be here.
So make sure you check out our website. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. Please, please, please. We're trying to get to that 30,000 subscribers. I know with your help with sharing this, we can do that. Also, go to our website, truthbetoldworldwide.com, and find out all our upcoming guests. Starting in June, we're going to be starting a Monday edition, not just Friday, with more topical stuff. So we hope you guys will support that. And until then, we appreciate you. For Captain Ron and Tony Sweet, it's Truth Be Told. Bye-bye.